It's hard to believe that it's come to this. Again. For years, we've all been told that the American war machine was winding down.
I lost a lot of my friends in Afghanistan. It's real. It's really real. We had no problem with Syrian people. They didn't bomb us. Nobody attacked America. It's just another way to get us in a war. That's what they're doing. They're just beating the war drum. That's all they're doing. They're beating the war drum.
Sergeant Springer is only one of the veterans out amongst the crowd. I spot Ann Wright, who served 29 years in the military and is a former high-ranking U.S. diplomat. She says the public won't tolerate being lied to again.
Well, 10 years ago, I resigned from the U.S. government over the lies that the Bush administration was giving about the need to invade and occupy Iraq. And here, 10 years later, the Obama administration, in my opinion, hasn't told the American public the truth about what's going on. If they have the truth in the details and the classified stuff, they better give it up, because the American public isn't buying another war on lies.
The U.S. administration has revealed little so far. It claims that it has evidence that the Assad regime was responsible for the horrific chemical weapons attack in the Damascus suburb of Ghouta. That attack crossed a so-called red line President Obama had marked out over a year ago.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus.
It seems for Obama that the Ghouta attack was truly a point of no return. Wary of going it alone, the administration sought a resolution from the UN Security Council. But the UN was paralyzed as long as Russia and China continued to use their Security Council veto to block any joint military action.
Security Council has a duty to move beyond the current stalemate and show leadership. This is a larger issue than the conflict in Syria. This is about our collective responsibility to humankind. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Left without a UN mandate, Obama tried to rally a coalition to the cause. But when America's closest ally, Britain, put the notion of a strike to a vote, it was narrowly defeated, to the obvious dismay of his counterpart, Prime Minister Cameron.
It is clear to me that the British Parliament, reflecting the views of the British people, does not want to see British military action. I get that, and the government will act accordingly.
That decision left Obama even further out on a limb. So on Saturday morning, 10 days ago, Obama assembled his National Security Council in the Situation Room to tell them of a surprising decision. Isolated internationally and under pressure from critics at home, Obama had decided to seek congressional approval for a strike on Syria. To some, it seemed laudable. To others, it looked a lot like he was passing the buck.
He didn't need to go to the Congress. What he was trying to do was sort of spread around the responsibility. What he risks is the ability of future presidents, not to speak of Barack Obama for the next 3 years, and his latitude in using military force when he wants to. That's an entire rewriting of the way that our government operates in a way that I think limits the president very, very substantially.
Obama has done us a favor by provoking a national debate, and frankly, he's captured the national mood.
The national mood seems to be cautious. And that's a stark and perhaps telling contrast to America's reputation for having an almost constantly aggressive military posture. Nowhere is this national debate so electric as in the Capitol. Today, the Brookings Institute is holding their own forum on striking Syria.
I think we absolutely have to do this because I think our credibility is on the line. Our credibility across the board, not just about chemical weapons.
But the national debate is not going Obama's way.
These two issues, the red line that the president drew last year was a mistake, and I think it's important not to double down on that mistake. Don't do something stupid just because you did something stupid before.
Up until 3 months ago, Jeremy Shapiro was at the State Department working on U.S. policy plans for Syria.
I think it's difficult to imagine the attack failing on its own terms since it's not supposed to accomplish anything.
He believes Obama's limited strike will inevitably draw the U.S. deeper and deeper into a situation that it's just not prepared for.
When I was in the government, I saw a lot of plans to topple the Assad regime, but not many plans to stabilize Syria. This is what I came to call, following Seinfeld, the yada, yada, yada doctrine. We will topple Assad, yada, 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 there will be stability and democracy in Syria. And I think, as Elaine put it on Seinfeld so well, we yada, yada, yada the most important part. And that is how to bring stability. We've never figured out how to do that in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think there's little confidence in the U.S. government or beyond that we could do it in Syria.
Meanwhile, the president insists it won't come to that.
The military plan that has been developed by our Joint Chiefs and that I believe is appropriate is proportional, it is limited, it does not involve boots on the ground. This is not Iraq, and this is not Afghanistan.
Without decisive U.S. intervention on the side of the rebellion, I see this country decaying into a series of cantons, militias, private armies. Some militias will be able to consolidate their hold on territory better than others. Unfortunately, that tends to be the most ruthless and violent ones who will be able to do that. But there isn't a state left anymore. We are in the worst case scenario.
The fear of being dragged into yet another conflict in the Muslim world clearly weighs heavily on the president. But now that he's finally willing to take action, Washington's hawks are still far from satisfied.
Like many people, I'm very ambivalent about what the president appears to be considering, because symbolic strikes on targets that may or may not alter the balance of power inside Syria really seem almost meaningless. You know, what are they other than to shore up potentially the president's credibility?
The uprising in Syria has now been raging for more than 2 years. And since the outset, President Obama seemed determined to distance America from the conflict. His critics say that this reluctance to engage has only made the situation worse.
Well, I thought that some form of military intervention was a good step at a much earlier juncture. You know, things have spiraled out of control in Syria, and the problem that we now face is that the opposition is as muddied as can be, with Al-Qaeda being involved. And so even if we seek to tip the balance, we've got rather a complicated challenge on our hands politically.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
To go ahead and say, I don't want to involve myself in backing this insurgency because it has become a jihadist insurgency, when it did become jihadist precisely because you didn't actually go in, have a clear policy, and stand behind it. So you're blaming the Syrians and condemning them to fighting the regime. Are all Syrians going to love you when the Assad regime is overthrown? And if those are the kind of solutions you're looking for in world politics, you probably shouldn't be president of the United States. You probably should be concentrating on things that are a bit softer.
We could topple the Assad regime, and there would be a certain satisfaction in that because it's a horrible regime. But it would not be a humanitarian gesture at the end of the day to topple that regime without a plan for what can come next, because we have seen in many instances that what comes next is the hard part.
It's this morass of competing concerns, along with their own partisan political interests, that the 535 members of the United States Congress are now weighing up as they prepare to vote in the coming days. And the president has been deploying everyone he can muster to help win them over.
You got 3 people here who've been to war. You got John McCain who's been to war. There's not one of us who doesn't understand what going to war means, and we don't want to go to war. The president is asking for the authority to do a limited action.
Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria!
Despite all the pleading, the numbers appear to be against the president. He knows it, and he's taken to the airwaves time and again to press his case.
Almost 3 weeks ago in Syria, more than 1,000 innocent people, including hundreds of children, were murdered in the worst chemical weapons attack of the 21st century. In the United States,
Even if the administration manages to twist enough arms to win the vote, polls show that the American public will not follow quietly behind.
Well, politically, it's suicide for Obama to go ahead and intervene into Syria because the American people don't want it.
From everybody that I have spoken with, friends, family, colleagues, nobody's for this. We don't know what the outcome's going to be and what the consequences are going to be. We could be another 10 years of fighting in a bloodbath, and we've already done that.
We're going to have a chance to see this week if we have democracy in action in this country.
For lifelong peace activist Medea Benjamin, the anti-war shift in public sentiment has been simply staggering.
The whole world is watching.
I've never seen anything like this before, which is we don't have to go out and convince anybody of anything. They are convinced. And this is a very middle America kind of thing. This isn't the traditional left getting out with big protests with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. This is people in their homes picking up the phone and calling their congressperson and saying, do not vote for this war or I will not vote for you.
A few, however, are right now looking past the red lines and even the possible strikes and asking the deeper question. What is the best that can be done to help those Syrians who are facing these fresh horrors?
There's a lot more that we could do to improve the living conditions for those people and to help the countries that have very generously hosted them, actually, and I think almost all of the neighboring countries have been have done very well on that score. But we could help them to integrate these people, to give them infrastructure, to give them education, so that they're not such a burden on the countries, and that would help stabilize the neighboring countries of Syria. You know, it's strange to me because this is a difficult task, but we know how to do it. It costs a lot of money, but it costs a lot less money than bombing the place.
There is a strategy in Syria that I would advocate, which is that this is an indigenous uprising by Syrian people who represent a large chunk of the population, who have legitimate grievances, and have shown that they themselves are willing to protest and risk their life and get shot and killed and tortured because they want to overthrow the regime. They're asking for help. They want money, they want weapons, they want to be trained, they want to be organized. You have somebody who is willing to, who has boots on the ground, it's their country, they're committed, they know the landscape, help them. There is an option here. You know, it's not a military solution to the conflict, it's not boots on the ground, it's not any of the things Barack Obama is horrified at. It's there. Why aren't you doing it? The only explanation for me is actually I don't really want to.
As I left Washington at the 11th hour, a dramatic proposal emerged. One that a reluctant America seems to be embracing: the surrender of Syria's stockpile of chemical weapons to international monitors, with a view to their eventual destruction. For now, an attack is on hold. There are many ifs, but this might just be the face-saving solution President Obama needs.